A child once told his mother that the hardest part of the day was waking up, because morning meant remembering that nothing had changed. There is something unbearably honest in that line. You hear it and feel a sting in your chest, because at algún punto da vida, you also woke up with the same weight. No disaster, no tragedy, just the quiet certainty that a brightness you were promised never arrived. This is where the lie of modern happiness begins to crack. Every day, someone with a good job, steady health, and no visible crisis sits in the car before driving home and stays there for 10 extra minutes, staring at the steering wheel as if it were the last object still holding their life together. Not crying, not breaking down, just stuck in a silence thick enough to swallow words. If you have ever felt that kind of stillness, you already know what Julia Kristeva called the black sun. A gravity inside the self that bends emotion and thought until even simple feelings lose their shape. The Greeks knew this territory long before psychology. They carved it into the story of Helios' son, Phaethon, who tried to steer the chariot of the sun and fell into darkness when he failed to hold the reins. A reminder that some forces inside us are too vast to be commanded by willpower, discipline, or the naive optimism we are trained to perform. And this is the point no one likes to admit. The pursuit of permanent happiness is not just misguided, it is corrosive. It corners you into believing that your sadness is a malfunction, that your exhaustion is a defect, that your silence is a threat to the social script you are supposed to play. Kristeva's insight is brutal. She claims that certain kinds of sorrow do not simply hurt. They hollow out the very capacity to speak about the hurt. Melancholia is a wound that does not know its name. One of her cleanest, most devastating ideas. And once you hear it, the glossy promise of happiness begins to sound childish, almost insulting. This video is not here to rescue the idea of happiness. It is here to dismantle it. To show why the notion that you must be content at all times is one of the most destructive fantasies of our era, and why accepting the impossibility of permanent happiness may be the only path to something more stable, more lucid, and more human. If you are still watching, it is because some part of you knows this already. You have felt the black sun. You have seen its shadow fall across moments that were supposed to be good. And you want to understand what the philosophers, the tragedies, and the real lives broken open by sorrow have been trying to tell us for centuries. So let's begin. The most disturbing form of suffering is not the one that screams, but the one that removes the ability to speak. Pain that cries out is still alive. Pain that silences is already somewhere beyond the reach of consolation, therapy, or advice. Julia Kristeva's concept of the black sun begins exactly here. She is not interested in sadness as a passing mood, nor in the usual narrative of overcoming. She studies a state in which the very machinery of meaning collapses. Depression, for her, is not only about feeling bad, it is about being expelled from language itself. Kristeva takes Freud's distinction in mourning and melancholia and pushes it to its limit. Freud says, in mourning, the subject knows what was lost. In melancholia, the subject does not. The mourner can say, I lost this person, this love, this possibility. The melancholic cannot name the object. Something essential has disappeared, but it has no clear face, no date, no funeral. Kristeva radicalizes this insight. She argues that in melancholia, the lost object is not just a person or a thing, but a piece of the self bound to an archaic other, often maternal, pre-verbal, anterior to clear memory. When this early bond is damaged or symbolically withdrawn, the subject experiences not just a loss, but a blackening of the inner sky. Hence, the black sun. This is not a poetic flourish. It is a structural claim. If language is built on early bonds, and those bonds are fractured or become inaccessible, then language itself loses its grounding. Depression in this sense is not feeling sad about life. It is the consequence of a primordial fracture in the architecture that lets you say I at all. Kristeva writes that the melancholic subject is fascinated by a void, a hole in meaning around which thought circles without landing. She also says that depressive speech often feels like a foreign language to the one who speaks it, as if words no longer belong to the body that utters them. Short phrases, almost broken, filled with pauses. Not because there is nothing to say, but because the link between affect and sign has been severed. Notice what this destroys: the popular idea that suffering can always be fixed by better thoughts, better habits, or better choices. That idea presupposes a stable speaking subject who can decide, reflect, and act. Kristeva shows that in melancholia, the subject itself is cracked. The I that would choose is partially swallowed by the black sun. Asking such a person to change mindset is like asking someone with a shattered leg to win a race by running more consciously. The paradox here is brutal and inescapable. The deepest depression is not an excess of feeling. It is a deficit of accessible feeling. Not too much sadness, but an inability to metabolize any emotion into language, image, or desire. Kristeva calls this a radical hatred of the self, not in the sense of explicit self-contempt, but as a turning inward of an aggression originally directed toward the lost object. The subject attacks itself because the true target of grief is unreachable. Greek myth offers a powerful echo of this structure. Think of Demeter after Persephone disappears into the underworld. The world does not simply become sad, it stops growing. Crops die, seasons freeze, life withdraws. That myth is not about a mother having a bad day. It is about a cosmic paralysis triggered by the loss of a fundamental bond. Kristeva's black sun is that paralysis interiorized. The psyche becomes a landscape stuck in winter. From here, any argument that treats happiness as a simple choice collapses. If the very core that chooses is damaged at a pre-reflective level, the command to choose happiness is conceptually absurd. It ignores the structure of the subject. It ignores the conditions under which choice is even possible. This is why Kristeva's thought is so uncomfortable. It denies the last refuge of optimistic moralism. It says, in effect, not all suffering is a matter of bad decisions. Not all darkness yields to willpower. Not all sadness can be translated into a lesson and filed away. The black sun is not a phase. It is a structure of experience where the symbolic order, the world of meanings and words, momentarily fails. In that failure, happiness is not simply hard, it is conceptually incoherent. Asking for joy in such a state is like asking for sunlight at midnight and blaming the sky when it does not obey. Kristeva also links this to creativity and thought. She suggests that some forms of artistic and intellectual work emerge from attempts to contour this inner void, to draw edges around the black sun. But even here, the starting point is not balance or clarity. It is catastrophe. The artwork does not arise from a surplus of life satisfaction, but from a struggle to articulate what threatens to remain unspeakable. The conclusion is unavoidable. Once you accept Kristeva's framework, the ideology of permanent happiness has no ground left. It does not simply fail empirically. It fails philosophically. It assumes a transparent, self-possessed subject that does not exist. It denies the pre-linguistic fractures that shape us long before we can read a self-help book or repeat a mantra. The truth that emerges is harsh but clean. There are forms of inner darkness that are not errors to be corrected, but conditions to be understood, symbolized, and worked through over time, often without complete resolution. In the presence of the black sun, happiness as a constant, controllable state is not just unlikely, it is impossible by definition. And once this is seen clearly, The cheerful narrative of total emotional control is not only weak, it is intellectually indefensible. We chase fulfillment as if it were a prize waiting beyond the next accomplishment. Yet the moment we reach it, the meaning dissolves like breath on glass. Nothing exposes the human condition more brutally than this contradiction. The harder we hold on to happiness, the faster it evaporates. What should feel like arrival turns into absence. What should anchor us slips. Philosophers have circled this paradox for centuries. Søren Kierkegaard wrote that despair arises not from pain, but from the attempt to become oneself by escaping oneself. A diagnosis unsettling in its simplicity. We try to engineer a version of ourselves immune to sorrow, then suffer when the engineered self collapses under the weight of reality. Albert Camus sharpened the point when he remarked that the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart, suggesting that the hunger for happiness often blinds us to the fact that life was never built to provide a permanent summit. Still, modern culture insists otherwise. Every advertisement, every wellness slogan, every corporate handbook speaks the same language. You should feel good most of the time. Emotional discomfort becomes a glitch to be patched. Sadness becomes a failure of technique. The world whispers that if you buy better tools, organize your mind, optimize your sleep, track your mood, upgrade your diet, and perfect your schedule, your inner landscape will finally stabilize into cheerfulness. But when philosophy confronts this narrative, the contradiction is immediate. Aristotle argued that eudaimonia arises not from constant pleasure, but from activity aligned with virtue, a life structured by tension, courage, and responsibility. Nietzsche insisted that joy is inseparable from suffering, and that any culture demanding comfort at all costs breeds fragility rather than strength. Even the Stoics, often misread as cheerleaders for positivity, believed that tranquility emerges not from chasing good feelings, but from facing life's brutality without illusion. The contemporary believer in permanent happiness stands defenseless before these insights. Once you acknowledge that suffering is not a personal malfunction, but a fundamental feature of existence, the modern doctrine unravels. It cannot argue back without contradicting the philosophical lineage that shaped the very idea of a reflective life. In the daily world, this plays out quietly. A person hits all the milestones, stable job, relationship, health, yet feels an unnameable hollowness lingering behind each achievement. They tell themselves it must be burnout, or a lack of gratitude, or poor mindset. But the symptoms persist, a sense of being out of rhythm with oneself, as if the interior world refuses to adjust to the script. Psychology has a term for part of this, the hedonic treadmill, the tendency to return to a baseline of mood even after significant positive events. But philosophy frames the deeper truth, that the human psyche is not designed for continuous satisfaction, it is designed for contradiction. Daily life provides countless small proofs. People sit in cafes scrolling through curated fragments of other lives and feel both envy and numbness. Workers climb the corporate ladder only to discover that each promotion brings not fulfillment, but a slightly higher cliff to cling to. Parents adore their children yet feel a flicker of grief for the versions of themselves they abandoned along the way. These contradictions are not flaws. They are the architecture of being human. And then, the happiness industry steps in, offering remedies for a condition that is not a condition. It sells the fantasy that emotional discomfort can be turned off with enough discipline or consumption. Yet the data, used only here to reinforce, not to dominate, show rising levels of anxiety and depressive symptoms across populations despite unprecedented access to wellness tools. The paradox becomes self-evident. The more we medicalize normal psychological tension, the more intolerable it becomes. Philosophically, the problem is deeper still. By demanding happiness, culture strips sadness of its legitimacy. It treats melancholy as a removable stain, rather than a signal of something essential. That the human soul is not a smooth machine, but a field of competing forces: longing, memory, loss, aspiration, fear, hope. Erase one force and the entire system destabilizes. Kristeva's black sun enters here as the counterweight to the modern myth. She reminds us that the psyche contains regions that cannot be optimized, only understood. Regions where language falters and the self dims, not because life is malfunctioning, but because existence has depths that no ideology of cheerfulness can flatten. Once this is grasped, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. The ancient dilemmas, the emptiness after achievement, the fatigue beneath routine, the sadness without clear cause, are not errors of the modern mind. They are the same tensions that shaped Greek tragedy, medieval theology, Enlightenment doubt, and psychoanalytic insight. We are not failing at happiness. Happiness is failing at describing what it means to be human. And in this realization, the myth of emotional success begins to lose its spell. The search for constant joy collapses under its own impossibility, leaving room for something more honest, more durable, and far less fragile than the fantasy we were sold. A person can survive betrayal, poverty, illness, and still rise the next morning. But the disappearance of a beloved presence, not only by death, but by abandonment or erosion, can dismantle the entire inner landscape with a silent violence no disaster matches. There is a form of loss so absolute that it does not merely hurt. It reorganizes the structure of the self. Love creates openings. Loss hollows them deeper. This is where Kristeva's black sun burns with its darkest light. She writes that the melancholic is forever separated from an object that was never fully theirs. A sentence that captures the impossibility at the heart of human attachment. We love in excess. We attach beyond reason. And when that bond ruptures, something more than affection disappears. A piece of the symbolic scaffolding that holds identity upright begins to give way. Philosophy rarely admits how much of our being is borrowed from others. We pretend to be autonomous, self-shaped, inwardly fortified. Yet the earliest psychoanalytic insights make the opposite case. The infant is stitched together by the gaze of the other. Meaning itself enters through relationship. Later bonds repeat this architecture. Lovers, friends, family. They do not merely accompany us. They anchor the coordinates through which we navigate the world. When one of these coordinates implodes, the psyche does not simply mourn. It destabilizes. This is why grief can feel disproportionate, irrational, or timeless. You lose someone and the world around you remains intact, yet the interior world undergoes a seismic shift. Memory fractures, desire slows, language thins. Kristeva calls it a collapse of the semiotic chora, the primordial rhythm of affect and meaning that precedes clear thought. In plain terms, the body forgets how to speak its own emotions. The Greeks framed this truth long before psychology. Orpheus descending into the underworld to reclaim Eurydice is not a story about devotion. It is a depiction of psychic disintegration. He cannot accept the void left by her absence, so he enters the realm of shadows in search of a shape to replace the missing one. His fatal backward glance is not a mistake. It is inevitability. No mortal can withstand the urge to confirm that the lost beloved still exists. And no beloved can survive such scrutiny. Eurydice dissolves because loss, once complete, cannot be undone. Modern life provides quieter mirrors of this ancient drama. A person leaves a relationship after years of shared routines, and suddenly the world becomes undecipherable. Objects in their home feel estranged. Words feel insufficient. Even future plans feel counterfeit, as if they belong to someone else. This is not weakness. It is structural. When the other disappears, the self loses a point of reference that cannot be substituted by willpower, productivity, or distractions. Kristeva makes the argument unavoidable. If identity is relational at its core, then the rupture of a central bond is not a surface injury. It is a wound at the level of being. Her claim that love is a threat to the unity of the self is not cynical. It is diagnostic. To love is to allow the boundaries of the self to loosen. To lose love is to feel those boundaries collapse in reverse. This destroys the modern fantasy that emotional stability is an individual achievement. It exposes the hollowness of any theory that treats grief as a phase or heartbreak as a motivational obstacle. The psyche is not a fortress. It is an intersection of bonds, memories, and mirrored meanings. You cannot lose a foundational relationship without losing a configuration of the world that existed only through that relationship. And this is why the black sun often rises within the terrain of love. The beloved is not merely a companion. They become part of the inner architecture. Their absence cuts into the pre-linguistic layers where words cannot reach. In that place, suffering does not express itself. It saturates. It becomes the background against which all other feelings dim. At this point, the opposing argument collapses. No ideology can claim that happiness is a matter of mindset, when the structure of the self is carved by bonds that exceed control. No optimistic worldview can dismiss melancholy as an error, when loss is woven into the logic of human attachment. And no cultural script can command immediate recovery when the wound touches the oldest, deepest layers of the psyche. The truth stands unchallenged. Love shapes us, and its disappearance reshapes us. The black sun is not a metaphor for emotional fragility. It is the shadow cast by the parts of ourselves built through the other. To love is to risk becoming incomplete. To lose is to confront the fragmentary nature of human existence. Yet this is not nihilism. It is recognition, the sober, lucid kind that strips illusions and leaves only what is real. Happiness was never the point. Every thread traced until now converges on this single recognition. The pursuit of a permanent inner brightness collapses under the weight of our own structure. The self is relational, fractured, porous. Sorrow is not an interruption of life. It is part of its architecture. The black sun is not an aberration, but a coordinate, an internal gravity shaping the boundaries of what we can feel, say, and become. The earlier chapters already exposed the cracks in the modern myth. The promise of constant cheerfulness fails in the face of the melancholic collapse of language. It fails when confronted with the ancient contradictions philosophy has catalogued for millennia. It fails in the quiet wounds left by love and its disappearance. What remains is not a refined version of happiness, not a better strategy for achieving it, but the recognition that the ideal itself is structurally impossible. This is not pessimism. It is lucidity. Kristeva's black sun revealed the depth of our inner fractures. Freud mapped the invisible losses that shape desire. Kierkegaard unveiled the despair of trying to become a self that does not accept its own limits. Camus reminded us that there is no sun without shadow, a sentence that now lands less as metaphor and more as a definition of the human condition. Together, they form a chain of insight that leaves no philosophical escape route. The argument closes on itself with the force of necessity. To live is to be marked by contradictions that cannot be cured. We seek meaning and collide with emptiness. We love, and in loving we expose the most fragile parts of identity. We mourn losses that have no name. We rise from bed each morning into a world that asks for brightness while offering no guarantee of it. The black sun inside us is not an enemy. It is a reminder that the psyche is deeper, older, and more complex than any cultural script demanding eternal positivity. Once this is understood, the obsession with happiness reveals itself as a refusal to confront life as it is. A refusal to admit that meaning is carved from tension, not ease. That joy is intermittent, not promised. that suffering is not a malfunction but a signal of depth. There is no peace in pretending otherwise. The truth is final and unarguable. We cannot live without darkness. We can only learn to move within it, to speak through it, to shape it into something that carries weight instead of crushing us. Happiness, in its pure and permanent form, is impossible. But lucidity is not. And lucidity does not require that the black sun vanish. It requires that we stop denying its presence. This is where all the arguments converge, not toward despair, but toward recognition. The black sun will not disappear. Yet the life lived under it can still be real, conscious, connected, and worth inhabiting. Camus offered the closing line for this truth long before Kristeva drew her map of inner darkness. In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. Not a summer of constant joy, but a stubborn inner movement that persists despite the cold. A summer that does not contradict the shadow, but emerges precisely because of it. And that is the final revelation. Light is meaningful only when darkness is allowed to exist. There is a silent truth most of us carry but rarely name. Some days feel heavier for no clear reason, as if an invisible weight were pressing against the ribs. We call it exhaustion, stress, burnout, but deep down we know it is something older, something that sits beneath language. A shadow that dims even the brightest moment. A private eclipse, and still you keep going. You push forward. You hold your world together in ways no one sees. That alone is an act of courage. That alone makes you part of the reason this channel exists. If this video spoke to you, if it touched a wound you don't usually share, or gave you a sentence you needed but had no words for, then know this. You are not alone in that inner twilight. There is a whole community gathered around these ideas. People who study, reflect, feel deeply, and refuse to settle for shallow explanations. People who recognize the black sun inside themselves and decide to understand it instead of running from it. If you want to take one step closer to this circle, consider becoming a channel member. Members help keep this space alive, stable, and free from the noise that usually swallows thoughtful content. They get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes insights, and a closer place in this growing community of thinkers who refuse to be numbed by easy answers. Membership is not just support, it is participation. It's choosing to help shape the future of a channel built on depth, honesty, and difficult truths. And if this video hit you in the right way, the super thanks button is another way to show appreciation. A small gesture that tells the creator, this mattered. This helped me. Keep going. It creates a bridge between what you felt and the work that made you feel it. But hear this clearly. Just by watching, sharing, commenting, and returning for each new video, you are already helping more than you realize. You are part of the reason this channel has a voice at all. If you decide to support directly, it means the world. If all you can do is stay, listen, reflect, and share, that is already a gift. Whatever you choose, thank you for being here, in the light, in the shadow, and in everything in between.